Good morning, good morning, good morning. We have 140 people that signed up. Thank you so much. To Die For by Huey Newton. All right.
Hmm. Wow.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. All right, all right. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Happy Black History Month. Welcome to Black History Nerds. I am your HNIC, your head nerd in charge, and I'm so delightful to have everyone here for our first Black History Nerds for Black History Month. Of course, you know we have one Black History Nerds every month, every Tuesday. In February, we have Black History Nerd every single weekend for the weekend. So please make sure that you sign up for those. You can go to our website to look at all our great guest nerds for this session, and we look forward to seeing you throughout the month here. For those who are new, right, every guest nerd brings in a new crop of people. We are the Center for K-12 Black History Education, Black History and Racial Literacy Education here at the University at Buffalo. And I just wanted to kind of introduce you all to our staff, Dr. Brittany Jones and Dr. Christina King, who are our two assistant directors. We also have Donovan James, Greg Simmons, Daphne Bibbs, and Montana DeSabio, who are our graduate student fellows for the center. For those who do not know, we have four basic goals: research aspects of Black history education, professional development for our teachers, networking for all these wonderful Black history educators around the country, as well as advocate for aspects of Black history. So just let us know what we can do for you, and we'll try our best to help you out. But join our professional developments either through our book clubs, through our Black History Nerds, and our other professional developments, including our signature program, which is our Teaching Black History Conference, which this year will happen July 26th through the 28th. Of course, here in Buffalo, New York. Come and learn about the rich history of Buffalo, New York, as well as learn through our theme this year, Black to the Future, Afrofuturism as Black History. If you would like to submit a proposals in, I believe on the first Saturday of March. Make sure that you submit a proposal, easy, 300 to 500 words. We'll have the link to the proposal site dropped into the chat in just a little bit and a few times throughout the presentation, so for easy access. So if you are interested in exploring and teaching us about the things that you do in your classrooms or things that you're looking for in terms of Black history, we would love to learn from you. Each year, we have around 300 to 400 educators join the conference, so you'll have a lovely audience. And then, of course, for anybody who has experienced our conference, it is nothing like the networking that happens at the conference, because you'll meet all these wonderful educators from California, New York, Florida, Georgia, Texas. Please join us for it. Registration will be open very soon. It's one of the cheapest conferences that you can attend. $115 for registration. For three, this is the only professional development that we charge for, and that professional development helps us build our budget, right? So and it helps me pay for these wonderful graduate fellows and our system directors, as well as our budget throughout the year, as well as our nerds, right? We pay them as well. The Association for the Study of African American Life and History, their 2024 theme this year is African Americans in the Arts. We'll post the website link in the comment section so you can read about it, as well as kind of understand what we mean by African Americans and the arts. It's 98 years, right? Since Woodson established Negro History Week. So for those who are interested, right, in doing something for the 100-year anniversary, the time is now to start planning. So just keep that in mind. So we're not doing any last minute things. I know we're trying to do something for the 100-year anniversary as well. I know the city of Philadelphia, the school district of Philadelphia is doing something as well for the 100-year, and planning is starting now. For those who don't know, each year the center curates Black History Month articles for Education Week, one of the largest education journals, online journals out there for practitioner teachers. So if you haven't examined or looked or read our articles for this week, please do so. Some of the featured, writers: Dr. Christine Wushner from Temple, Dr. Brittany Jones, of course, from the University of Buffalo, Dr. Ashley Dennis from the College of Charleston, and then Abigail Henry, who most likely is not 100% official, but most likely will be a graduate fellow next year for the center. But she's a teacher out of the city of Philadelphia and a great Black history educator herself. We'll post those links in the chat for you all to read. You should be able to read some of the articles for free, and then there's a paywall behind those. But if you want to look at these 4 articles, just let me know. I do have a PDF for those as well. Also, the center, of course, wrote about their favorite Black history resource list, all right, for educators. So of course, that's a wonderful resource list. It's typically the most read article for the year. So please support them as they are looking for the resource list there. And I wrote about who's improving Black history education for everyone, 3 standouts. Please read that. They are accompanied by videos of all these great Black history educators. Miss Lori Smothers, who had a Black independent school in Athens, Georgia, called the Black Joy Village. And when I went to visit the Black Joy Village out in Athens, Georgia, let me tell you, she was doing wonderful work. But because of a lot of these Black independent schools have to receive funding, right, for their things, it so happens that she had to close. But I would love to see her open back up. The Black history stuff that the students were learning in that Black independent school in Georgia was excellent. All right. Also, we featured Brandon Brown over Schoolyard Rap. You all know about Brandon. He does his thing in terms of entertainment, and he does wonderful things with Black history education. And of course, I featured in class with Karen Hunter and Dr. Greg Carr out at Howard University. They do wonderful things. So after you finish Black History Nerds, and after you finish our book clubs, you can definitely go check them out as they educate us every Saturday morning there. Book clubs. We are finishing Push Out. Daphne, you want to say a few things?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Today will be our last book club session on Push Out. If you are interested, I'm going to drop the registration link in the chat for you. We will be focusing on the last chapter, but you will still be able to gain and be fed information needed so that we can stop the push out of our Black girls. So I'll post that information in the chat, as well as my email if you all have any questions for me.
All right, and our second book club of the year is Donovan. Donovan will say a few things about that starting February 10th.
Hey y'all. So starting next week, we'll be doing a book club session with my book, Beyond February, Teaching Black History Any Day, Every Day, and All Year Long. So if you have the book, come join me. If you don't have the book, you can still come join me. And it may take a little while to get your book, but please come and hang out and talk about the ways that we can teach Black history in the elementary classroom.
Yeah, it may take a while because it's a sellout. I mean, everywhere I go, Beyond February is sold out and it's taking a long time. So I don't know what you're doing if you don't have Donovan's book. All right, I'm so proud of Donovan for writing this book and for everyone who has said some wonderful things about the book. If you're an elementary teacher, even if you're a lover of Black history, you have to have this book. So if it does take a little bit, it doesn't matter. Come to her book club on February 10th, February 10th through March 9th. After that and after spring break, then Greg will have his book club, which we'll probably introduce a little bit later. All right, shameless plug. All right, we got the Girl Scout cookie plug here. All right, if you need Girl Scout cookies, all right, please order for my baby. She has some she has some goals that she would like to achieve in terms of her selling her Girl Scout cookies. So if you need Girl Scout cookies, you can even donate Girl Scout cookies if you're on a diet, right? You know what I'm saying? They some Girl Scout cookies, they're gluten free now. Some of them are gluten free, all that good stuff. So if you want to need some Girl Scout cookies, please buy through this link from my daughter. If you don't, I assume that you don't like Black girls or you don't support Black women in entrepreneurship. All right. So I'm just saying, I'm just gonna assume that, right? But anyway, no, just if you need some Girl Scout cookies, please support. I would definitely appreciate that. All right, now to our guest nerd, Dr. Daryl Michael Scott, and I will tell you that I was introduced to Dr. Scott in graduate school from his wonderful book, Contempt and Pity. All right, Greg probably will, put a link in there for the book. If you're really interested, you should be interested. Wonderful book, and I was like, wow, and with his connection to the association and my understanding of Black history education, I said, well, if I have an opportunity to meet this brother, I'm going to meet this brother, talk to him, and all this good stuff, and I'm so happy to have him here. So Dr. Michael Stott is a professor of United States history at Morgan State University and chair of the Department of History, Geography, and Museum Studies. Dr. Scott retired from Howard University. He has to teach me how to do that. Retired and get another job. That's some game right there. All right. Where he taught for 20 years. From 2005 until 2009, he served as chair of the department. Dr. Scott also started his career at Columbia University in New York City in the early 90s. Afterwards, he served as the director of African American Studies and African American Studies at the University of Florida at Gainesville. I'll be very interested to hear his thoughts about what's going on down there. He researches and writes on American intellectual history, nationalism in the United States, and currently convict slavery since 1615. In 1998, he won the James Rawle Prize for the best book in race relations, of course, from the book that I just mentioned, Contempt and Pity. And he joined the faculty at Howard University, which connected him to the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, where he was elected vice president of programs. And then also, he served as president of the association during its 100-year anniversary. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to stop here and I want to recognize Dr. Michael Scott as our guest nerd for today.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be your guest nerd. I guess I have been a nerd all my life and proudly so. And I also will say that I grew up in a community that had no problem with Black kids being nerds. I don't know what they're talking about when they say that there's a kind of anti-intellectualism in the Black community. And I grew up in a Black community that was very large, very strong, and that was the South Side of Chicago circa the 1960s. So I'm excited to be here, excited to be a nerd, and my connection with Asala actually goes back a very long way. Uh, And I want to talk to you about that to open this up because I have a very troubled history with Negro History Week, Black History Month, and Woodson. And this is partly an introduction with a confession. When I was in school, in grammar school, it was still Negro History Week. So I'm a 60s kid. And Negro History Week to me was a problem. And it was a problem because even in grammar school, I was attracted to history. I didn't know I was going to be a historian, but I read from Lerone Bennett's From Slavery to Freedom when I was in second grade. My first history paper was cribbed from his book. It was Abraham Lincoln, White Supremacist. And so I was deep into history, read John Hope Franklin's From Slavery to Freedom. This was all in second and third grade. It was the 1960s. And quite often people were what we now call woke. So I was a woke kid, all right? So it's no problem. Now, being a woke kid, I was also an intellectual because I wanted to know more than the facts about history. I wanted to know what made the world work, okay? Why did history matter? And the problem I had with Negro History Week is that it was a recitation of facts for the most part. Who was this inventor? Who was that inventor? And it didn't excite me. And so I used to just think little of that. And then I would sit back and say, well, if we're just saying what we have achieved as Black people because we invented this, invented that, then you get into debates and you would be talking about who sent someone to the moon and who could explode or create an atom bomb. So I kind of had a problem with all that. As a kind of growing scholar, I had a problem with Woodson. When W.E.B. Du Bois, the famous historian, wrote that Woodson wrote dry as dust history, he did, okay? And so I had a problem with that, okay? So Woodson, in a way, I was not a Woodsonian, as I call it now. I'm not a Woodsonian. Wasn't a Woodsonian back then. So I had issues with Negro History Week. And I changed my mind about Negro History Week, Black History Month, and Carter G. Woodson when I started walking in his shoes. When I started walking in his shoes, okay? And that began as a promise to myself when I was out of the Army, back in college, and I was trying to prepare for a career as a historian, and I had to go somewhere because there were no classes in Black history where I went to college. And so I literally went to the Journal of Negro History and I read from the first volume in 1916 to the scarce volumes that came out in the 1970s and early 80s. Now, I was committed to being a historian, whether I would go to a good graduate school or a bad graduate school, whether I got a job or didn't. And believe me, in my life, I've always known that I could get in trouble. I wasn't the valedictorian in my high school because I got in trouble. I couldn't serve as the president on student council because I got in trouble. And when I got closer to academic life, I knew that I didn't agree with most people who were writing. I would get in trouble. Okay? So I knew there was this great possibility that I wouldn't be an academic historian. But I decided that I was going to be a historian one way or another. That the folks who give out degrees couldn't determine whether I was going to be a historian. The folks who give out jobs, they couldn't determine whether I was going to be a historian. And in reading the Journal of Negro History, I knew I was learning my craft, but I was also getting an appreciation of Woodson that went beyond those original things I was, dealing with, right? that I got to know a little bit more about his story. And I got a sense as I grew as a scholar of what he achieved. But what sealed the deal for me is when, as an undergraduate still, I went to the library and the librarian said those recent issues of the journal weren't available and had a kind of look on her face as if to say that they're not putting them out, you know how they are. And then I said, if there's anything I could do in my career, it would be to help put Woodson's house back in order. And so that was my promise to myself. There was no other person in the room. I just resolved that I would do what I could do. And it just turns out that in 2003, I was asked, well, 2002, I was asked whether I wanted to run for the board of the association. And I said, of course, okay, because I had made this promise. And so I ran and I won. So I was on the board of the association. And over the course of the last 20 plus years, I pretty much have dedicated a big part of my career to putting Woodson's house in order. And I learned so much about Woodson in the process that I now feel silly about my early critiques of Negro History Week, Black History Month, and of Carter G. Woodson himself. I got to understand that what he achieved was more than writing history. What he achieved was more than putting Black people's history as a kind of topic that we study in school. What Woodson had done is created the longest standing celebration, commemoration of American history, the longest sustained commemoration and study and celebration of American history than anyone else in the history of this country. There is nothing more profound in American cultural history than Negro History Week, now Black History Month. Nothing equals it. You know, people will sometimes say that for 28 days we got the shortest month, as if white people gave us this month. You know, nobody gave us February except Woodson, okay? So no one gave us this month. But for 28 days out of every year, Black history is likely the only history you're going to get in our country. And I mean that from the classroom to the corporate rooms. I mean that from the military to the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. Nothing has penetrated American culture when it comes to intellectual life like Negro History Week, Black History Month. Now, you'll also discover that if you really talk to people about history, it's hard to get historical facts, let alone interpretations, to stick in people's heads. Lord, when I go out every February, and I've been doing it for a long time now, and I take out the 13th Amendment, nobody's read it. I could talk about the 13th Amendment every day. And for many people in the room, it'll be something new. We all can complain about how there are tropes in Black history, ruts in the road that deal with Frederick Douglass, that deal with Martin Luther King. We all know these problems, but that just goes to show you. Those of us who are interested in trying to expand what we do, we have a very basic mission, And that mission is to get people interested in history beyond those tropes. And you could spend your whole career trying to get people to know about Sojourner Truth, and you will still be on that same John or Joan the Baptist mission for the rest of your career. And as anyone who teaches K through 8 knows, it's always new to the young students, and from one year to the next, they not retain it well. So, but what Woodson has done, what Woodson succeeded in doing, is putting Black history and American history on the agenda. And as I've been telling conservatives for a long time, February and Black history might be the only American history you're going to get. And forget all this noise about not wanting to learn it. Not wanting to learn Black history, because we know a lot of these parents don't know who fought the Civil War, let alone CRT, DEI, and anything else, that they don't know history. They can be rallied around history, but they don't know their history. Okay? But so that critique that's out there is nothing to us. Okay? Because we still are the way to the past. And February is the portal into history for the rest of the year. And by the way, I'm one of those 365 people, okay, like most of you, and Woodson was too. For Woodson, Negro History Week was a time to demonstrate what you had learned all year. Okay, so it was 365 for Woodson as well. Okay, now I want to step back and put some of this in context. I want to give you a sense of the struggle that Woodson had to do what he did. And I also want to put out there from the very beginning that Carter G. Woodson was first and foremost a teacher. Dr. Woodson only taught at the collegiate level for 3 years. 3 years. But he taught from the age of 20 forward. Okay? He only taught at the college level. 1919, he goes to Howard University. He's the kind of guy that would get in trouble too. He was pretty much fired at the end of his first year. Didn't get along. He was a man of too high principle, if you might say. The next year, he lucked up and got a job at West Virginia Institute, where his friend, John W. Davis, hired him for 2 years. And then after those 2 years, Woodson devoted the rest of his life to the association. And one of the things he would do is use his relationship with this association to spread the word in the schools about Black history. So his whole career was about teaching the public about Black history. First the students, then the public. Now we might say that Woodson was a public historian. He was one of the first of the public historians. It was because Woodson believed that history was for the people. Now, how did he come to this position? Well, Woodson was born in 1875 in Virginia, and his father and family was poor. He was largely self-taught. His parents weren't literate, but he did have a literate uncle. And Woodson taught himself to read largely from reading what was known as Guffey's Reader, which is a little book it's hard to find, but he read that book and taught himself how to read fairly well. And it was Woodson at that young age deciding that he wanted to be an educated person. But because he was poor, he didn't get a chance to go to school. He moved to West Virginia, Huntington, as a teenager working in the coal mines with his big brother. And in the coal mines, he used to listen to the Civil War veterans talk about the Civil War. So his introduction to history was an introduction to the Civil War. And his teachers were the Civil War, Black Civil War veterans. So he learned firsthand the history of the recent past that was living on in the Black folks who were there. And so Woodson wanted at that point to know more about history. And it was at the age of 19 that Woodson went to high school. And so Carter G. Woodson was largely self-taught, motivated to get an education by wanting to learn more about the world and the past. And so for the rest of his life, he was on this quest for an education. And some of you know it took him to Lincoln University. It took him to Berea. It took him to the University of Chicago. And ultimately, it would lead him to Harvard, where he received his PhD in 19. By the way, I do something. I always do this. I always get a year wrong. I can never remember which one. I do this about everything virtually. In 1912 or 13, I can never remember. Okay, but I finally remember the start of the Civil War is 1861. I make fun of myself about this because, again, I don't think these dates are the important thing. I think the substance of history is really what's important. But yes, you got to know time frames. Don't get me wrong. You got to know where something is situated next to the other. But my bigger point is that Woodson decided as a kid, and he wrote this in one of these McGuffey readers, that he was going to be one of the two kids. There were two kids, one who was a never-do-well, and the other who made something of himself, made himself and his parents and everyone proud. And Woodson decided that he was going to make something of himself. And he actually did, against all these odds, rising from a 19-year-old entering school formally to becoming the second PhD in history at Harvard. Now, as a teacher, he taught in the public schools of Virginia, he taught in the public schools of DC, and he taught a stint for the United States government in the Philippines. He rose to a principal when he was in the DC school system. And so here was a guy with a PhD from Harvard who was a secondary school teacher in DC. And we like to say, well, that's just the story of racism. It's not that simple. He would have had other opportunities to teach. He did get an opportunity to teach at Harvard. But Woodson decided while a high school teacher that he was going to transform how the entire country and perhaps the whole world thought about Black history. He was going to do this as a high school teacher. That was his resolve. So when Carter G. Woodson founded the association in 1915, he was a high school principal. When he founded the association, there were no other university professors or professors in the association. His PhD was the only PhD in the association. And yet he dared to start a scholarly journal because he believed that through this journal, he would take the story of the Negro and crush the falsehoods so that truth could rise. He was a very religious man. And he believed that truth would win the day. So he established the Journal of Negro History in 1916. And in 1920, he started to realize that the journal was not going to transform the world. But he believed that the association and Black people still could. He starts the association in 1915 while he was in Chicago at an event, the half centennial of emancipation. He was not there as a scholar, like some people like to say, that he was there because he was supposed to be at the University of Chicago attending some event. We now know that Woodson was there with a display at the half centennial. The half centennial of emancipation in Chicago was a huge event. I mean, something we can't fully comprehend, but it was held in the convention center of that age, which was the Chicago Coliseum. And there were 10 to 15,000 Black people standing outside, having come from around the country to celebrate a half century of emancipation. And Woodson was inside that building with a booth promoting Black history and Black posters to the crowd. So he was doing the work of a public historian, and it was there doing that work. You know, the PhD, not so good to think that he shouldn't be manning a booth and promoting posters of Black history, that he came up with the idea, or should we say he acted on the idea to start the association. So we should not be surprised that in 1920, he starts to say, we got to get this word out to the people. And how are we going to get this word out to the people? He went to the convocation of the Qs in 1920. And while there, he told them that they had a mission. And he was a grad chapter Q, but he told them that they had a mission. And that their mission was to spread the good news about Black history. Now, I use that good news thing like it was the New Testament, okay? I mean it in this sense. Woodson said that if, in fact, you knew the history of the Negro, if you knew about your great past, no one could convince you of your inferiority. And if you taught the world the greatness of your history, no one would be able to continue to say you had made no contribution to history. He literally believed that he was spreading the news, the good news about the Negro past, and that there was nothing to be ashamed about, and that the world, when they got it, that we could transform race relations. He was a Christian, and yes, he was very optimistic, okay? Optimistic about that whole thing. Now, the Qs, I think, were moving too slow for Woodson, but they did move. They started holding Negro Achievement Week, and by the way, they still hold a Negro Achievement Week. I mean, they don't call it Negro Achievement Week, they call it Black Achievement Week, and they still do this, okay? So they took up the mission, but Woodson wanted it to go national. He wanted it to be bigger than that. And so in 1925, he decides that the association was going to tackle this himself, okay? And so the association, under his leadership, started to promote Negro History Week. And so I know I can talk at you guys all day, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to talk about, for just 1 second, how it grew. Now, I've written about this, and you can Google me and Negro History Month, and you can see the rest of this little story I'm telling you there and parts of what you've heard. But the point I'm making with all this is that Woodson's idea of Negro History Week preceded all other kinds of notions of weeks, the celebration of a people for a period of time. And I also want to make this point that made me feel better, that Woodson's goal was never just to talk about great individuals, that what he was really aiming at was talking about how Black people played a role in civilization as he understood it, and in transforming the societies in which they lived. So it wasn't just about the facts, okay, as we remember them, who was this person and who was that person, but he believed in that. He believed that you had to get the word down to that kind of level, but he was really trying to explain the big themes in history. He believed that the Negro was the central player in the drama of American history. He got that phraseology from a white writer who basically said precisely that. The Negro is at the center of this drama. The fate of the Negro is the fate of America. That way of thinking, Woodson believed that we were of this kind of importance in our history, and that we were of that kind of importance in world history. So by the time he passed away in 1950, he had succeeded in establishing Negro History Week, and in his wake, the association continues it, and it becomes eventually Black History Month in 1976. So it shifts from a week to a month. And we could talk about all that kind of stuff, but the main point is that we still, almost 100 years later, are doing this, and the association believes that it's our mission to continue this basic struggle, that we don't give up February, because February is the launching pad for the year, and that you don't undermine your institutional foundations with some ill-defined, unstructured, uninstitutionalized notion that is every day. Just be like saying that it takes a village to raise a family, therefore we're going to get rid of family structure. Okay, it would be that absurd. So what you do is you build structures that sustain things, okay? You don't let it just be floating in the air. And so Woodson was an institutionalist, and he left behind a pretty shaky institution. But there's always been people who have bought into his vision to keep this alive, so that this is the longest standing celebration. Now, some people are saying, I'll close on this note, that Carnegie, that Negro History Week is really given to us by the federal government. Well, Black History Month, and here's the truth of it. In 1976, the association went to the federal government and said, we want you to endorse Black History Month. And presidents have done so ever since. But never be unmindful about one thing. If the federal government decided that there would be no more support of Black History Month, we would probably have the largest Black History Month celebration that next year, okay? Because it belongs to Black people and all of those who believe in the mission. And this is why, and we believe in the mission, this is why it's the longest standing celebration of American culture. And don't take it for granted. So with that, I'll end and take any and all questions.
All right. What a powerful talk this morning. Wow. All right. So what we'll do is we'll open up the floor. Montana, look in the chat to see if there's any questions there, but just unmute yourself and ask away. I can get us started then.
Okay.
I have a question because of course the center, when I developed the first center at Missouri in 2018 and here in 2022, my model was the association once I began to start studying Woodson and the association. And you mentioned that this is and I argue in my field in social studies is that Black folk essentially started social studies in many different ways, because this was the organization started before the National Council for the Social Studies, which was 1916, right? But in passing the torch, right? What lessons can we learn from building an institution? What happened once Woodson passed that may have weakened the? I know we have Bethune and all these other people who kind of stretched it, but what lessons can we learn to extend Black institutions that may have kind of hindered the association a little bit?
In the history of the association, I'm going to say something that's kind of provocative. I still get in trouble within the association. The proliferation of PhDs is not good for the association. And the belief in credentialism is perhaps the worst part of that, okay? So when Woodson passed away, Woodson's boys, as they were called, and there were about 5 or 6 PhD holding members of the association, and they included people like John Hope Franklin, Charles Wesley, Rayford Logan, Lorenzo Green, and a few more, who were expected to become the director of the association. But none of them wanted to give up their university positions to do so. One of Woodson's only Howard students, a master's degree holder, volunteered to be the director. And Mary McLeod Bethune appointed him. And there was such a hue and cry from the PhD holders and others that he was forced out of office. Now, the next director was Rayford Logan, the Howard professor, whose skin was too thin for that kind of job. I don't know if anybody knows, being a director of any organization that's a not-for-profit that has a membership base, is that you become an employee, okay? And Woodson wasn't an employee, but kind of he was too, but that's another conversation. But we now think of the founder as someone so solid in his position that no one could question him. But I'll assure you, Woodson created a business separate from the association to take care of himself in case he lost control over the association, okay? But when you become a director, you are an employee. And Rayford Logan's skin was too thin to succeed at that. And he took the opportunity when he was offered a fellowship to go and never come back. So from 1951 at some point to 1965, the association would not allow anyone without a degree to be the director of the association. And no one with a degree took over the directorship. So for 14 years, the association had a president who worked in Ohio, Charles Wesley, the great institution builder, the Alpha, and the Mason, the Elk, and a whole lot of other things. He was one of our greatest institution builders, but he was a day-to-day guy as president of Central Ohio University. Is Michigan or Ohio? It's Ohio. Okay, so he was there, and there was no day-to-day person except Brooks, who was a teacher without a PhD. So he carried on unofficially at night as the executive director without the title, without the salary. Now, so the PhDs didn't step up. The editor of the journal became a person who was an autodidact no PhD. James Brewer, and he was the editor of the journal for almost 20 years. So the association was being kept alive by the non-PhD holders. Charles Wesley comes back to Asala in 1965 after retiring as the president, and he became the executive director. And so it took, again, a PhD. So a PhD becomes the director. Now, most of the people increasingly become PhDs in the association with the proliferation of Black academics in this new age of Blacks getting PhDs. But by the 1980s, despite all these PhDs roaming around the building, the association almost dies again. When I come to the association in 2003, there was a surfeit of PhDs, very few lay people. And once again, it was too many PhDs. Now, this is just my personal hypothesis that I think I can demonstrate with some evidence that when we get too many PhDs and too few lay people, we stand to die. And one of the biggest fights I had was to get people to accept that there could be a woman without a PhD who should be the executive director, the current executive director. Okay, so she technically is our Woodson, but no one would see it that way. That's not how they see the association. To this very day, we think of the PhD as the apex in what we do, and that, to me, that has weakened us. And this is why I emphasize, it's not Woodson, the PhD, who does this. It's Woodson, the high school teacher, who makes this thing happen. Okay? And when I started doing this work and I went to the social science organization that teachers have, I think maybe the one that you're talking about, the first thing I learned is that they didn't care anything about teacher educators. Be careful, you teacher educators. Because they believed that they were the people teaching the history and they didn't need to get it from on high. And I had already come up to this notion that this is really being done by teachers, that history is being carried by the teachers, that Black History Month is really about the teachers, that they're the ones proselytizing students. And one of the reasons I'm angry, and I get angry, and I'll tell people at no uncertain terms, I was upset when we got into this debate about 1619 and CRT and all these things, because I knew the people who would pay the price would be the teachers and the students. It would be the teachers and the students while somebody else got paid for being a talking head, okay? And so to this very day, we stand on the shoulders of teachers, and they are the ones who make our history work. And it doesn't matter whether it's in a integrated school, a Black school, a military school. It's the teachers who make this thing work, and they are always going to be on the front line. So this notion that Jarvis Givens has about fugitive pedagogy, this is the truest thing. Whatever differences I have with him, this is the truest thing. I've heard teachers tell the story. I've heard 90-something-year octogenarians, 90-year-old folks tell the story of how they in the segregated South or how they in the integrated North fought to get Black history in the schools. And they're the reasons we're on the brink of 100 years of celebrating and commemorating our history.
Great, great, great. I saw there were two questions in the chat.
Yeah, someone asked, in the light of the current political climate in America and American universities, what role do you believe or would like to see the association play in furthering Woodson's vision for African Americans in American history?
I want us to be everywhere, okay? And right now, here's my problem. Woodson disingenuously said that we shouldn't be involved in politics. And he was always involved, except as a partisan. So I'll take it to the extent that he meant we shouldn't be involved in electoral politics, okay? But the promotion of history is always political. And Woodson understood that. But we are functioning at our best when we don't politicize it, even when we teach. When we teach, we undermine ourselves when we are heavy-handed with our favorite interpretations that are in your face to other people, okay? Woodson used to say, and he says it in the Mised if you never get it anywhere else, that it's not so much that we don't want to study George Washington, but we also want to study Peter Salem, okay? And what the spirit of that is to me is that he's not trying to tear down the quote unquote founding fathers. He's trying to expand the narrative, okay? That we all have to find ourselves in the history we're teaching. Now, we have hit a juncture where we need to be careful. And this is, some people say, you're conservative for this. I'm a pluralist, a multiculturalist. And I have told generals during Black History Month meetings in rooms full of generals who say we should assimilate. I say, General, you don't want to see the war in this world that would lead to the melting pot that would create a homogeneous America. You don't want to see that world, General. You don't want to see that war. You don't want to see that war. So we are in a society with a lot of other people. And teachers get this. And your mission is not to boost the ego of one student at the expense of another student. You're not supposed to teach the inferiority of or the subordination of anybody in your classroom. And you almost all know this instinctively. You know that they're your charges. So then history can be so heavy-handed that it can alienate people. And you say, well, we're going to force the good news on you. That is a lot like taking the sword and saying, convert to my way of seeing the past. It is our job to not be so heavy-handed, but to make everybody feel inclusive. And it doesn't mean you don't always tell the truth. It means you don't always go for the jugular, that you don't always seek to poke the other students from other backgrounds in the eye. And 95% of you, I'm sure, understand that. Because when you teach, it is a powerful thing that when you're in the front of the classroom and you see somebody with earnest questions and so forth, no matter where they come from, your goal, you understand that you have the power to make a kid cry, to make a kid go home and question everything about themselves. You know this. You know this, and some of you have had the opposite experience, so you really know this. And I'm saying what we have to do is to make sure that we take the task to people who go too far. And I don't necessarily mean publicly taking people to task, but saying that our kids come from all kind of backgrounds. And we want to depoliticize this as much as we can so that their emotions are not so at the center of talking about the past. And people say, well, no, they got to learn hard histories. And just like everybody who gives you harsh medicine, they understand you put sugar on the damn pill, right? You put sugar on the pill.
All right. Anyone in the crowd? Unmute yourself, ask a question. All right, Montana, we have another one in the chat.
Yeah, someone said, could you speak to Woodson's experiences living and teaching in the Philippines under a form of U.S. colonialism and the U.S. imposition of problematic state pedagogies on the Filipino communities?
Okay, let me say this. You know, I've said before that I don't call myself a Woodson scholar. And this is precisely why I don't. We know what he says in the Mised, Education of Negroes, in which he gives this example of the Filipinos who are not being taught their own history, who are not being taught to appreciate themselves. And he seems to be wholly on the side, okay, of the progressive Filipino. But let us not forget for one moment that Carter G. Woodson was an extension of American imperialism. He was there wearing a uniform, teaching on behalf of the United States in an imperialist enterprise. And until I get records from on the ground, I don't know if this is an after action report that he writes in the that he comes around on this issue, or how much did he have to soft pedal that when he was teaching? Was he involved in some kind of fugitive pedagogy, or was he basically with the program and later on rethinks it all? I don't know. But in the absence of that evidence of Woodson in the Philippines, I can't say that's just too big a missing chunk for me, okay, to say I really know Woodson. And it spills over to his personal life. It spills over everywhere. I don't think I can understand Woodson unless I can be with him in the Philippines. And I can't, I don't know. I mean, but it's a great question. I love the question. I'm not into hagiography. I don't know what he was doing over there. You know?
All right, before I get to Christina, just real quick books. I don't know if y'all want to put this in the chat, but The Education of Blacks, 1860 to 1935, kind of deals with the notion of the politicalness of Black teachers and Black education. Washington and Du Bois. Anderson was hard on Washington or whatever the case may be. So, just take that there. Of course, Fugitive Pedagogy. We did a book club on that last year by the Black teachers and Black history. Black intellectual thought kind of goes a little bit deeper into Woodson's philosophies. Their Highest Potential by Vanessa Celia Walker, with Black teachers at the core. And of course, you take my black education class. You have all of these alternative Black curriculum from 1890 to 1940. Will give you some insights into Black educators, Black teachers, Black women educators. First Class that talks about Dunbar High School in DC. Michael Hines just came out with a worthy piece of work. The story of Madeline Morgan about the first Black history curriculum out in Chicago. And of course, everybody on this call should have Miseducation. But if you don't have Miseducation, please
get the authorized version. Stop using that bootleg copy.
Well, I'm just full professor, so now I can afford all those other books.
No, that's Daryl Scott, the institutionalist speaking. You don't know how many people I fought to try to get rid of, like a whack-a-mole, to get rid of all the unauthorized versions. But anyway, I joke with you, but the association has a version.
Yes, and
but anyway, I'm going. I'm just being playful.
Oh, no, no, no. I definitely do that. Definitely. And Donovan, can you do that list in the chat? Someone just asked the question there. And Greg, if you can help out. Hey, Christine, I hadn't seen you in a bit. What's your question?
Hello, sir. Thank you for this. Dr. Scott, so much of what you say resonates with me, and I appreciate you and I appreciate your work. Knowing the struggles that we are having now, finding curricula to put in front of students that tell the history in a way that centers the lived experiences of Black Americans from the mouths of Black Americans. Where are Dr. Woodson's books, all of the texts that he's written, all of his textbooks? Why are they not in schools?
Well, that's an interesting proposition, and I'm going to tell you. Let me shift it from Woodson, because there's a question about the age of scholarship, the age of anybody's work, okay? That when history is being done at its best, there's a great possibility that a work written 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago is passing on lots of unintentional inaccuracies, okay? That if knowledge is building from generation to generation, then you don't want to lean too heavily on a previous work. So for instance, Du Bois talks about there being no slaves in prisons, because who would put a slave in a prison? So if you imbibe that old history, you would think that was true. But truth was, there were slaves in prisons. In Georgia, in Louisiana, in Virginia. Du Bois was just wrong, okay? The same thing goes to a body of work by Woodson. Woodson's study of Negro migration was the first in a lot of studies of Black migration. And quite frankly, half of what he said turns out over time through further research not to be accurate. So every time a historian is writing, they should be trying their best to build on the work of others and to add to the knowledge that we have. And so a lot of Woodson stuff is passé. What makes the mised so transcendent of time is that it's not a history. That is actually 1930s social commentary. Okay? What makes the souls of Black folks so powerful is that it's not a history. It's a contemporary piece about the condition of race relations at the turn of the 20th century. So commentary is much more useful over time than particular histories, okay? And if you rely and treat it, and a lot of people do, people who read Du Bois's Black Reconstruction, by the way, I'm a Woodsonian, not a Du Boisian. I'm okay with Du Bois, but I just read Reconstruction. I say, get rid of this book and read the books from Reconstruction that Woodson students were writing. But their interpretations, in fact, stand up better over time. But not even those books stand up over time relative to good scholarship, okay, from the present, because we do want to know the role of women during Reconstruction, because we do want to get beyond the politics and get into what was happening in education and so forth. So what I'm really getting at is Woodson's body of work doesn't stand up And is almost all old history should come with a sticker that says read with caution. Now there's some new books that people get careers made off of that we could put a sticker on and say, don't read except for entertainment. Okay. Okay. For entertainment purposes only. I don't care where they teach and what kind of degrees they have. Some of this stuff is purely entertainment. It doesn't hold up well because they don't even look at the body of literature the way we used to. Okay. So I say that to say we should. Now, one of the projects I was involved in was to work with the Black Classics Press to put out some of Woodson's older books. And that stopped. You get off the board, things stop. So that stopped. But we had done 2 or 3 of his books. And perhaps I think they should be put out, but with good introductions, very good introductions that tell you where the book is no longer up to snuff.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because we know that history is up to interpretation anyway, and language changes over time, so I think there are many texts that we teach in the classrooms today that, as you said, should have that cautionary sticker on them, right? So
Right.
why not have some of Woodson's text in there? And as literacy is my lane, and as a literacy scholar, Dr. Woodson's work, many of his principles and the foundations of teaching, other people have, taken the message without citing Woodson. But then I'm reading Miseducation of the Negro, and I'm like, Woodson said this in the 1930s, but these people are now making money off of it, but they're not citing him. And I find it offensive.
I have a plagiarism thing too. And by the way, there's no excuse for professionals to do that. Some of this pop stuff we read, okay, but there's no excuse for professionals. None whatsoever.
All right, everybody. We're a little bit over time, but that was needed. So a few things before we go ahead and get out of here. As you'll notice, some of the staff was wearing some of these Black History Nerd hoodies, and we have t-shirts. Those will be coming on sale very soon for people on our website, probably along with our conference t-shirts that are very popular. So be on the lookout for that. We always love the support for everyone who signs up and registers, as well as people who come face to face virtually, whatever the case would be. In 15 minutes, Daphne will hold her last book club. So if you are participating in that, make sure you sign up for that. Log in for that. And if you want to say something to Dr. Scott in the comments, please do that. We'll send that to him along with the videos. All right. Anything I'm missing? Oh, if you have any Black History Month activities, please make sure you email either Donovan or Daphne. They're over our socials, so we can support you all and bring that out to our people as well in the social media world. Daphne, you have anything?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay. All right, Donovan, you have anything?
No, but we promise to get that list to y'all. We see y'all asking. We're going to get that for y'all in an email.
Yeah, the list of the books. And for those who were being messy when Dr. Scott said there's some books we should read for entertainment, presently, we're not touching that. You can email him privately about that. I don't know anything about that. So you can email him on that. Greg, you have anything? Greg, you have anything?
No, sir. No, sir.
All right, and Montana, you have anything for the group?
No.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next Saturday. We have Dr. Frederick Dixon, who will talk about the history of Black Studies next weekend. Make sure you register for that on our website. And we have all the links in our comments there, and I'll send that out to everybody. If there's no other things, we are going to end right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Scott, for your presentation. And thank you everybody for coming out this morning. See you later.